Hello, friends. Most people think that wealth is when you have a big beautiful house, an expensive sports car, expensive clothes, different objects and things. This idea of wealth is cultivated in films, in advertising, in social networks. But what if I tell you that such an image of a rich person is completely fictitious, unreal, illusory? This image is largely imposed on us by the producers of those very goods and services, since it is impossible to sell them more to someone who is modest by nature, thrifty, who wears inexpensive clothes and lives in modest housing, consumes exactly as much as necessary. Companies will not be able to make a profit from such a way of life of people, since it does not attract attention, does not force constant consumption, and therefore does not provide GDP growth. And many even actually poor people try to seem rich, to lead the way of life that is constantly shown to them, like a carrot in front of a donkey. Most really rich people actually have quite modest houses, ordinary cars and, on the contrary, try to lead the most modest lifestyle so as not to stand out from the rest, so that others do not envy them. Wisdom is to strive not to envy other people yourself, and at the same time to live in such a way that no one envies you either. Rich people have investment accounts, own securities and businesses that bring income, but they try not to show off their wealth to anyone. They are like ordinary simple people. Outwardly, by their behavior, you can't immediately tell that these people are really rich. Money loves silence. Understanding the importance of looking poor, not teasing others, this is a really interesting and important feature of such people. Saying, "Look poor," I do not mean extremes like wearing dirty or worn-out unkempt clothes, saving on everything, but only a simple and modest life. Real wealth is the money, the resources that you have not yet spent, which provide financial freedom. Imagine that you see a friend of yours who got out of an expensive car worth, say, $200,000. He has an expensive watch on his hand and status clothes from famous brands. Usually you think, oh, cool, he is very rich. But in fact, the only thing that can be reliably said about this person is that he no longer has these $200,000 that were spent on this car when he bought it, on its maintenance. And everything else is just our assumptions. It is not at all a fact that the person has financial freedom. It seems to us that perhaps this person really has so much money that he can afford to spend so much on consumption. But we do not know for sure. Perhaps this is an attempt to throw dust in the eyes, perhaps the expensive car and all the things were bought by him on credit or with money that he will have to work off for a long time and hard in the future. Perhaps this person is deeply unhappy and in order to compensate for his internal complexes, his desire to be accepted in society, he needs all these status markers, things, expensive liabilities. Perhaps, it would be worth even feeling sorry for him, but most of us feel a certain admiration for him, and some even feel envy. Let me remind you what envy is, what is a brief definition of this concept, this feeling. Envy is suffering over the success of another person. Expensive real estate for your own residence, expensive things and household items, an expensive car, all this is actually liabilities, not assets, since it does not generate income, but only requires maintenance, pulls more and more other resources, money, time, effort to take care of the car, pass the technical inspection, and so on. The concept of liabilities and assets is the cornerstone that underlies the understanding of the economy of any process. Be it the economic situation of a plant, enterprise, business, when we evaluate the accounting reports, or the life of an ordinary person, when we evaluate our expenses, measuring them against our monthly income. When you see a person in modest clothes, getting out of a modest car or living in a modest apartment, you do not see the real state of his wealth, you do not see how many shares, bonds he currently has in his portfolio, what income the person derives from renting out real estate, dividends and coupons, from other sources. And it seems that this is a poor person, not rich. But it does not even occur to anyone that such a person can have real wealth associated with investments, shares in a business or bank accounts. We cannot see all this. For real wealth, only two components are needed, the first is the ability to earn, and the second is the ability to save. If the first requires some qualities, such as energy, enterprise, professional qualities and even the ability to take risks, then the second, the ability to save, requires the exact opposite, namely modesty and frugality. I talked about why it is so important to learn to be frugal and how frugality differs from stinginess in another old video on this channel, which is called, Why Is It Important to Be Frugal? Stinginess and frugality, what are the differences? You all know famous examples of people from show business, sports, artists who were very good at making money, but did not learn to save at all. For example, boxer Mike Tyson, who was forced to declare himself bankrupt, actors Nicolas Cage and Johnny Depp. The same Michael Jackson, who was able to become a real star during his lifetime, a popular singer, spent a lot, but died with a debt of $400 million. Now you understand how important the skill of saving is. You can be very good at earning money, be talented, professional and enterprising, but if you do not know how to save, then your personal balance, your financial well-being will still be at risk. And vice versa, a person who does not have the most outstanding earnings, but from an early age has a useful habit of methodically saving and investing money, he will inevitably, one way or another, become financially successful. For example, a salary, income, equivalent to $700 per month is considered very low today. It is practically at the poverty line. And if you are asked whether a person with such a low income can become a dollar millionaire during his life, most of you will twirl your finger at your temple and confidently answer that this is unrealistic. It is simply incomprehensible, simply impossible. But if we open a regular deposit calculator, a table in the program Microsoft Excel, for example, with monthly capitalization, that is, taking into account compound interest, enter variables with an average yield of 10% per annum, with a monthly replenishment of this amount, then we will find out that to receive a capital amount of $1 million, only about 25.5 years will be needed. In other words, if a person began to save money immediately, say from the first day of his work, for example, from the age of 20, then, by the age of 45 he can, in theory, become a dollar millionaire. Of course, if you have the desire and willpower. You can check these mathematical calculations yourself. It is clear that all these calculations are conditional. You will say, how is it possible to save your entire salary? Let's say, imagine that a family of 2 people, a husband and wife, without children, have social benefits or a monthly income of $700 each. They try to live on one salary. If you have your own, not rented housing, this is quite realistic. And the second $700 are invested, saved. Could such a situation be possible? Purely theoretically, of course, it is. Here is the result: by the age of 45, you can definitely become a dollar millionaire. Mathematics cannot lie to us. $700 is a very small income. I took this figure deliberately. The average resident in most developing countries, even with a strong desire and time, if he develops discipline, will be able to become a dollar millionaire in 25 years. Based on simple and reliable calculations. I do not urge you to do this, but if purely theoretically you use risky investment instruments and the average return is equal to 20% instead of 10%, then the period for accumulating a conditional million is reduced to only 6 years. Or in the case of an increase in the amount of monthly investments. In 6 years, it is theoretically possible to become a dollar millionaire from scratch, the owner of capital exceeding 1 million. Sounds beautiful? This is not fiction, but simple mathematics. Provided that the rate of exchange will not change if the savings are in other national currencies. The calculation is, of course, very conditional, approximate, of course, but it shows the state of affairs, reflects the often mentioned magic of compound interest. This example of mine reflects the possibilities of capitalism and capital accumulation. The calculation shows that nothing is impossible for any person. The only obstacle is a sufficient savings rate, financial literacy and sincere desire, the discipline of the person himself throughout life. The higher the savings rate, the higher the level of discipline, the faster the necessary capital will be formed. It's simple, capitalism comes from the word capital. The rules of the game are known to everyone: someone becomes rich, those who accept these rules, and someone remains poor. And what's interesting is that wealth is in our heads. History knows dozens of cases where ordinary people won a huge fortune in the lottery and still ended up poor because they, like Mike Tyson and Nicolas Cage, lacked financial literacy and an understanding of what the savings rate was. They had no sense of thrift and no skills to save capital. The vast majority of people who have a monthly income the same or much higher than the figures I have given, the conventional $700, will of course remain on the edge of poverty due to their low financial discipline, natural impatience and passions. Not only will they not be able to endure for 25 years, but after saving the first few tens of thousands of dollars, they will begin to feel a kind of itch all over their body, an uncontrollable desire to quickly spend, to get rid of the accumulated amount of money. In Belarus, we even have such an interesting saying, such a stable expression: money burns through the thigh. A hint that people usually carry their wallet in their trouser pocket on the thigh. Capital is a responsibility, a test that requires endurance, special preparation. As soon as a more or less decent amount of money accumulates in the account, expenses immediately appear, the desire to buy something. A new car, new furniture, the desire to renovate an apartment or house, go on holiday abroad, and so on. What is the difference between a bad hunter and a good one? The ability to endure, the level of their volitional delays, efforts. Remember, I gave this interesting analogy about a bad and a good hunter in the video about patience, which is called, Stop Putting Up With This. Suffering and patience in our lives. Our Belarusian proverbs come to mind: patience and work will overcome everything. For every desire you need to have patience, God endured and told us to. Money flows from those who do not have patience, willpower, to those who have this willpower. From less enterprising people, to more enterprising and more energetic. Therefore, it does not even matter how much you earn, what your income is. If you do not have the skill to save, everything will be useless. Wealth, like sand through your fingers, will slip out of your hands. In order to seem rich, to impress others, people buy expensive status things, luxury items, but all this is liabilities. Real wealth is built on the acquisition of assets, not liabilities. When someone tells a story about how a hypothetical John Smith is rich, because he has a high salary, he has several expensive cars, a sailboat at sea, a country house where he comes every summer with his family, many different status things. But as soon as, for example, such John is fired from work, loss of income or an accident associated with illness, with loss of health, all this instantly turns into huge liabilities. These liabilities will be a heavy burden on the shoulders of John and his family. Professional athletes, for example, often suffer from this. They earn a lot during their active careers, but as soon as they get injured or end their careers at 35 to 40 years old, they are often forced to declare bankruptcy. As it happened, for example, with the famous boxer Mike Tyson. When you lead a lifestyle in which you try to demonstrate your wealth, you thereby deprive yourself of real wealth, real freedom in the future. Looking rich, successful, and being so are completely different things. The image of a rich person also imposes additional obligations on you. For example, loans and installments taken for consumption are obligations, and by choosing a more modest lifestyle, you voluntarily avoid these obligations in advance, directing more resources to the purchase of assets. Assets are what will bring you cash flow in the long term. Real wealth does not need proof, status markers. The desire to brag, to show off in front of friends and acquaintances is something that humans inherited from our distant ancestors during evolution. These traits of our psyche come from animal nature. We want to emphasize our status, to attract more attention from the opposite sex. Only a peacock, for example, fluffs up a large and bright tail for this, and a person buys an expensive sports car. A man, a male Homo sapiens, attracts a female by demonstrating his high status, wealth, and a woman, by the way, also uses special forms of deception to increase her conditional rating, her attractiveness. By the way, the fashion for plump lips and bright lipstick is nothing more than an animal desire of a female animal to show her readiness for mating. Since during ovulation, the lips of most animals of the primate order swell and become brighter, edematous, attracting a male. Women who paint their lips with bright lipstick and inject silicone and Botox into them, like some species of monkeys, seem to shout, "Choose me. I'm ovulating. I'm ready to mate." Wearing high-heeled shoes is not just a fashion trend, but to show the male an artificially thin area of the ankle joints. This is a valuable marker for the unconscious selection of a female for mating in the wild. The male also subconsciously chooses clothes that visually make the shoulders wider. Men's clothing with vertical stripes is designed to create the illusion of a man's taller stature. Evolutionarily developed biological mechanisms for attracting the opposite sex, increasing one's status, of course, work today. Even despite the development of social and spiritual moral relations between people. By the way, about the mechanisms of increasing or decreasing social status, the mechanisms of insults, there was also a rather interesting video on the channel, which was called, How to React to Insults and Hate. Thus, many people who are unable to cope with the animal inside themselves, unable to overcome temptations, unfortunately, have a fairly low level of volitional delays, and therefore, as if by nature, are not able to accumulate and save their resources, transfer them over time. A person who is truly integral, self-confident, possessing high moral qualities, usually does not feel the need to prove his status to someone through the purchase of status things, excessive consumption. Yes, the syndrome of postponed life, excessive hoarding, obsessive hoarding, this is another extreme. Sometimes it even turns into a disease. But killing the goose that lays golden eggs is also irrational, it deprives us of financial solvency in the future. Any wasted, even a small amount of money at the age of 25 deprives you of a much larger, tens of times larger amount at the age of 50. Remember, those calculations of mine with the theoretical possibility of saving $1 million thanks to the magic of compound interest. This magic is very difficult to comprehend, it is hidden from our psyche. Think about what is more important to you in life, to overpay today, but to buy a fashionable status gadget, for example, a smartphone with an image of an apple, say for $1,500, or to have a sum of $10,000 or even $100,000 in old age, when money, perhaps, will be much more necessary to you than today. When health is worse than now, in youth, when expensive medicines are needed, other important items of expenditure will appear. Some say that it is only in youth that you should enjoy life and spend, while others say the opposite. There are as many opinions as there are people. For example, the famous investor Warren Buffett once noted, if you spend money on what you don't need, you soon risk starting to sell what you really need. With age, you begin to understand one simple thing, the main and absolute wealth of a person is health. Because when you have health, everything is a joy. It is better to ride a bike to the forest, for a walk, than even in an expensive car to the hospital. You can conduct such a thought experiment. Imagine that there was a fire in your house. You ran out into the street, without having time to take out any material things. What do you have left? You have your intellect, your knowledge, skills, and abilities. You have your family and friends who can lend you a shoulder to cry on in difficult times, help and support you. This is what you should invest in first of all, in your health, in your education, in the education and upbringing of your children, your loved ones. This is what I call priority investments at all times. And only after these, the most important investments, can we consider the possibility of investing in everything else. These are my thoughts, friends, some food for thought. Thank you for your attention and see you soon.